Union defiance in the Empire State, the second largest New York public employee union, voting down a deal with the Cuomo administration that would have prevented layoffs in exchange for a 3-year wage freeze. Well, now 3,500 union jobs could be lost. So why are unions unwilling to compromise, even to the point of having their own members forced into unemployment? We're joined by former New York Assemblyman and Demos Senior Fellow Richard Brodsky and Brett McMahon, Miller and Long Construction Vice President. Gentlemen, good to see you. Thanks for coming in. So why is it that unions, to the point of actually risking the jobs of their members, are willing to go this far?
Well, go carefully with the word unions. This happened to the Public Employee Federation.
Right. But that's a union.
It is, but the other major union in New York agreed to a change in work rules and compensation.
Yeah, but the end result is that it's all tied up, right?
It's tied up for some of the workers now. This is a consequence of industrial democracy. We've got a collective bargaining system that generally seems to work. In this case, the membership didn't agree with the leadership. It's going to come back. It's going to get taken care of. But the notion that unions are across the board defiant isn't true. Labor unions built the middle class. They're worried and they're scared. Sometimes they don't react.
Well, but properly. Brett, the fact is that there are a lot of look, I hope he's right. I hope in the end the union leaders and our elected officials are able to come to some agreement. But there are a lot of disputes now that aren't working out well. And I'm thinking of Wisconsin, one of the prime examples of that, where they had this recall petition. Governor Walker, of course, representing the state. Eventually, I think just a couple of the 6 or 7 people were recalled. Most were not. But the unions put in tens of millions of dollars trying to do that. So there's this huge clash between the elected officials in this country and the public sector unions.
Yeah, and the public officials are there on behalf of the taxpayers who are actually paying salaries and in many cases are far deeper in hock for benefit packages than most taxpayers are aware of. I mean, this is sort of the underlying problem here. I mean, kudos to Governor Cuomo for attempting to at least take it on. Can I address the whole middle class thing very briefly? I think, frankly, the 8th and 25th Air Forces are actually more responsible for the growth of the middle class during the early 50s and things like that. Nobody else on Earth could compete with us because no one else had any manufacturing base.
Well,
that is probably
Richard,
more responsible.
Okay, go ahead. Richard wants to respond directly.
There was a time in American history where the working people were paid peanuts. It was labor unions that organized real Americans, got real changes in the way of compensation, and created the middle class.
You know what I hate, Richard?
What do you
is
hate?
That term, working people. We all work our asses off. I'm a very wealthy man. God bless. I thank everybody for that. But I work my ass off. You work your ass off. Don't use that general term. That's a dividing term.
I withdraw that as a dividing term. But I don't withdraw the notion that it was organized labor and the GI Bill and government working together that created the American
But Brett, is organized labor now, particularly the public sector unions, operating at odds with coming to some kind of consensus in this country?
Yeah, I mean, when they first began public sector unionism, and I think it was 1958 or 59, the whole notion of having public employee unions before that was anathema to everybody, including FDR, as everybody's familiar with the favorite quote. I mean, the problem is you end up with systems like these pensions and probably more so the health care benefits that are just incredibly underfunded around the United States. They are often constitutionally guaranteed in state constitutions, which means in the end, the taxpayers are going to be paying for them.
Richard,
and frankly,
a lot of those constitutional provisions about unions are being amended right now because of budget realities. I mean, you just can't avoid the budget realities.
We can't afford to pay what we've been paying in many ways.
Right.
There's an economic argument. But give me a break here. The average New York worker makes less than $40,000 a year. The average New York pension is about $24,000.
Are you saying that there is not overweight in terms of union payment for people like management in the management who is still members of the unions working for the MTA?
Sure, there are abuses, and sure,
tremendous abuses in every city in this country.
And let's focus on them. But the notion that the problem in New York is people whose average compensation is $40,000 a year and whose average pension is $24,000 is baloney.
But we're talking, Brett McMahon, about the average teacher's salary in Wisconsin of over $60,000 a year.
Yeah, and those average numbers are a little bit skewed. I tell you what, if you want to make a deal on pensions, let's propose this. Propose the Dutch model. And here's what it says: is you get as a pension compensation on an annualized basis after you retire, you get the actual average of your salary over the course of time of your salary. So if you started making $20,000 a year, you end up at $100,000 a year. You know, that's what, $60,000 as your average salary. That is something worthwhile, not these inflated things where they pump it all up at the last year or two and include all these overtime hours in the last year or two.
I'm
delighted to see conservatives telling us we ought to adopt the European model. If we're going to adopt some of it, maybe we ought to adopt all of it.
It's a rational model that works. It's a rational model that works. If the idea was that you were supposed to get a slower salary and a better health care, better benefits. Okay, and my grandfather was a government worker. That was his deal. Back then, they actually did make a lot less, and he did get some kind of a secure retirement.
Well, the pendulum